Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speak, Film, and Enter, a podcast where we review and rank movies. I'm Nate.
And I'm Adam.
And Adam's had a long day if you can't see him, if you're just listening to this on the podcast. But
I've got that giddy, overtired energy right now. It's
it's kind of a fun one to have, but not at the same time.
But I'm exhausted.
Yeah. When your body is just like, just have fun with it.
You know what? We're going to use the last bit of your energy on joy, and then you're going to crash.
Exactly. Yes. So today we're talking about a movie that doesn't quite fit that level of energy.
0%.
And that is TÁR, a movie about cancel culture and this isn't a spoiler, the rise and fall of a great artist. And that artist is Lydia Tarr, the conductor of the German Symphony Orchestra. There's probably
Berlin major German orchestra, but the Berlin Symphony Orchestra.
Yes, thank you very much, Adam. Played by Cate Blanchett. As you probably know, if you've heard of TÁR, you know Cate Blanchett is in it. I think before even knowing what TÁR is about, you know that Cate Blanchett is in it and that she is right now the favorite in the Best Actress race.
Yes.
And one thing I find interesting about this movie is that in some ways I want to do a spoiler review and talk about all of it because there's so much to talk about. But at the same time, the themes and performances and character work are so strong that you can really talk about most of the movie without spoiling anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too.
So this will be a spoiler-free review. We could talk about this movie for a really long time. We're going to try to keep this, in the 20-ish minute range like we typically aim for. But, I mean, I guess, did you have a place you wanted to start? Or otherwise,
the only thing I wanted to say is because we talked about how, if you know anything about TÁR, it's about Lydia Tarr. Lydia Tarr is a fake person. She is not a real conductor. She is not a real person. She is a fictitious invention of some sort that somebody made a story about. This is not a real person that has been all over social media that oh my God, who was this person? How come we didn't know about her? It's because it's not real. So just want to get that out of the way right away.
That's good. And I find that funny because, I mean, the movie does play out in a kind of, this is what really happened, or the crazy, the story from her perspective,
the true story. Yeah.
Kind of thing. And I mean, it is, but it's just fiction. And it does seem like there are a lot of people that look at this and think oh, this must be based off a real person, which I think part of that too is because I don't recall many other movies that are made about fictional conductors.
No,
it's not an area that's explored too much. It's very high society,
ritzy,
high
elitist
art kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Hollywood makes so many biopics now that a lot of people just probably assume, oh, this is just some real person I've never heard of. Well, thank you, Adam. It's not. So, and that makes me very happy as far as the Best Actress race is concerned, because I feel like the Best Actor or Best Actress is given to somebody playing somebody famous.
I mean, at least the last couple of years, it's been those are high in the runnings.
Right. And there's skill in that, but there's also an impressionistic element that it's a hard thing to do, but I tend to be more drawn to performances where the actor or actress with the writers and the directors is completely making a new character, a new person. It's all them.
Agreed.
And I find that more interesting. And I think, starting with her performance here, for me, it easily lived up to the hype.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, to go back to your point just for a hot second, I agree that it's more enticing to have somebody who's making up a character or introducing you to a character, because you're always going to, it might be easier as an audience member to go, oh, that was a really good performance because they remind me so much of the person that they're being. Right. That's not really how impressive is that really? How many people do you know that can do impersonate a voice, or are really good at mannerisms and really getting that down? There's talent in that, absolutely. But every year somebody pulling that off is
Exactly.
Okay, you're
And
one of the best actors in the world. Of course you can fucking do it. Like,
right. And that's why I find this more interesting. There just seems like a lot more to explore to me. And I don't think we need to even talk about her performance that much, just because there is a lot to talk about with like the subject matter and like the pacing and all the other performances and the script here.
yeah,
But I think she's phenomenal. I mean, in this movie, she learned piano for this movie. She has scenes where she goes back and forth between English and German, like in like mid-sentence.
yeah,
And the way that she's able, and this is a big part of what her character does, is just control the room or see that control slowly kind of slip away from her as the story progresses. I thought that was fascinating because you're seeing a character here who is in a way in constant performance mode. She's got this sort of persona that she has created for the public, and she's always performing for somebody, whether it is a public audience or the members of the orchestra that she's conducting, or agents, or reporters, or whomever,
romantic partners, or
exactly. So I find that interesting because they make a point in this movie about how so many of her relationships with people are transactional.
Yeah.
And they are, but not always in the exact same way. And she's putting on different faces for different people. And that's one of the things that, like, there's just so many parts of this performance that is so difficult, or just little areas where it could have been, oh, she did all these 7 things really well, but this 8th thing that they asked her to do was just so. That's not the case. She nails every single thing she's asked to do in this movie.
Yeah, it's as opposed to like a movie where you get like a lot of different characters in their interrelation or their interpersonal relationships. I cannot speak with everybody else, or how that group dynamic goes. It's just her interpersonal relationship with every single person, and that's the part that's different at every turn, but all varying shades of the same thing. Because
they come from
basically just a huge narcissist, and
and a control freak.
Exactly,
and. Yeah, I mean, and that gets us into, we mentioned this movie's about cancel culture, which is kind of a hot button term and something you might not be able to totally tell from the trailer.
Yeah.
But generally what we see is we're introduced to this character in a wonderful exposition dump. Like a very
2 scenes are
elegantly
like
done exposition dump of just like, here's all of her accolades.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting that the movie starts that way, because it seems like the type of thing that she would do when she first meets you.
Yeah.
If you don't already know who she is. I mean, there's got to be an element of she just assumes that people in her world know all of this about her.
Yeah, if you're going to see her, that it's about her. You didn't stumble into it on accident like you can like some other things.
Cultivated that she's going to find a way to make sure you know that anyway.
Yeah.
And so we kind of meet her. I almost feel like calling it a rise and fall story is a little misleading, because we meet her and she's like at the top of her game.
Yeah, it's like absolutely the peak.
Yes, she's at her peak when we meet her, and she is, I mean, you can tell too that she's brilliant. However narcissistic and manipulative she is a genius at many things.
Yeah, and
one of which is conducting an orchestra, and her knowledge of the history of her field is extensive and intimidating. Almost.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we see her do all of this, and I lost my train of thought here for a second, thinking about how I wanted to say like 4 things at once.
Yeah, I'll pick it up and just say like that type of concoction of like me forcing you to know about me, like absolutely it's born from a place of confidence and born from a place of like, I absolutely know I'm better than you at what I do. Like there's no way ifs, ands, or buts about it. She is fantastic. She's just also a horrible human being, like personally.
Yeah,
so, like,
I was gonna get into what she's doing. She's doing the what's his name? Is it Mahler?
Yeah, Mahler is the.
She's done Mahler's. She's done 8 of his 9 symphonies, and she saved what is apparently the hardest one for last. I have no knowledge of this. The 5th, and that's kind of once. It takes like 45 minutes to start getting into rehearsals for this, but once we get into it, some wonderfully shot and put together scenes of her conducting the orchestra during rehearsals. And I don't have enough knowledge of how this actually is, but everything I've read from people in the industry say, like, Todd Field, the director, and Cate Blanchett, like everybody just nailed the technical aspects of this, and everything is just done perfectly, and like the relationships, it's all exactly how it is. So we kind of meet her, and she's basically at the top of her game and attempting the hardest thing she could attempt.
Mm-hmm.
And she's almost there. She's like this performance away from cementing herself in history. So I guess saying she's at the top of her game is maybe not. She's 99% of the way up the mountain.
Yeah, she's done all of the hard work to get to like the absolute dream. Like, I get to choose what I get to do. Like they mention in her accolades that there's basically like 5 major symphonies throughout the world. It's like, I'm not gonna be able to remember them. Like Berlin is one of them. The Met, like playing at the Met. So the like New York, or like some of those, like those are the big ones. And instead of just being like a guest conductor for those, because a lot of people do that, she was like a resident conductor for several years at each of them, which is much harder to do. So she's just so well versed in her world that like she's an EGOT, which I mean, if you're unaware of what that is, it's an Emmy, Tony, Oscar, and Grammy award winner, and there's 15 people total ever that have done it, and she gets to be one of those people. So she's like extremely talented, held in super high regard, and it just shows. It's
where this becomes about cancel culture is that there are some things that are kind of bubbling under the surface, little hints that we get throughout the story from a past student of hers.
Mm-hmm.
We learn early that her and like her agent or benefactor or whatever run a school for women to learn to become conductors. And her assistant, who is played by Noemie Merlant,
the great,
who you may know from Portrait of a Lady on Fire, who Adam absolutely knows from Portrait of a Lady on Fire. She is a graduate of that, and she's working as her assistant. There's another character who we don't meet, but there's illusions. You get wind of like potential misbehavior or some allegations, and then something happens where it all kind of blows up and becomes a giant thing on social media, and she's trying to weather this storm and sort of hold off the people who in her minds are just nipping at her heels.
Yeah, just coming after her because she's so great and big and
right. And that's where we get back to kind of the way she treats people and the way that the character relationships work in this movie. This is a movie where Todd Field doesn't hand the audience anything. He doesn't hold your hand through it. Mm-hmm. He trusts his audience to pick up on things. There's a lot that's just kind of left unsaid or maybe a little ambiguous, left up to the imagination. For instance, I guess the actual opening scene of the movie is she's sleeping on a plane and we see somebody like filming her and texting over it and just talking shit about her. And we don't know who that is. And so we don't know why. We get that. And then all of her accolades and accomplishments. And then the rest of it is basically from her perspective. And we're kind of left. I feel like he tackles kind of all sides of this without ever really taking one. This feels to me like a movie that's more interested in just presenting how things are than necessarily taking a side. Although I think I have an idea on which way it leans by the end of the movie. Yeah. But it's not so much so that he's like planting a flag.
Yeah,
on one side of it.
It's like he wants to bring this issue to light because I think especially in entertainment, actors, producers, directors, all of that, media, television, movies, all of that, everything that encompasses entertainment. This is a question that's kind of hot on the mic, is like, if somebody has been a terrible person at some point in their life, like how good do they have to be for you to still be able to like them? Or still be able to like appreciate their accomplishments or think that they're worthy of note or whatever. Like we're seeing like Kanye West currently, like Harvey Weinstein from the back. Like you can even go back to like one of the first ones, like Chris Brown. Like how good can someone be before they lose fans or before society decides that they're not good enough to hold in high esteem anymore. Right.
And he holds this up. And I think this is partly why he chose to have a conductor as his main character here, because it could have been any type of artist, right? Mm-hmm. But this goes back longer. The history of conducting and composing goes back far longer than pretty much any of our like more popular modern forms of modern entertainment.
Yes.
I mean, she's trying to hoist herself up and stand with giants. Like,
Yeah.
we all still are familiar with the music of Bach and Beethoven and Mozart
And
all other kinds of Mahler, all these other kinds of names. We don't know what kind of people they were unless we look into it, but the music has lived on. So I think that's why he decided to frame it that way. And it's to challenge the audience in a way. I also think that there are parts of this movie that says, like, cancel culture is not as big of a thing as we make it out to be. You know, if you want to talk about somebody like Louis C.K., like, yeah, he lost some things, but he's still touring. He made a movie this year.
Yeah.
He's not in jail or anything. Like, there's an element of it where there's just a lot of gray area in this movie. And it's something that I think it's the kind of movie that I mean, I can see people loving it. I can see people thinking it's too long and too cold.
It's definitely not an easy watch.
And being
you have to sit through some
perhaps
moments, some sluggish moments, and really take a deep breath and like try to analyze it yourself. It's
right. But unless you hate it and don't want to ever think about it again, I think you're going to be able to have long conversations about this movie after.
I agree.
And that's where
that's the point. To me, that was the point.
I mean, we could talk about this movie for like 3 hours on here.
Yeah.
We won't, don't worry. But it's probably going to go longer than we planned on because there are so many things to talk about. And one kind of big thing that I wanted to get to
was that. This too. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. We did decide to make that this time. We had it up before. I didn't even notice it.
Forgot about it. Sorry.
Is her partner is a woman who's in the orchestra.
Yeah.
And she is first chair. There's a more technical term for this because she's like the highest ranking member of the orchestra. That's not like one of the conductors or assistant conductors. So that is her partner. They have a child together. And so already right there, you see something that it's accepted by everyone because they're sort of openly, officially together. Right. But you know, just from watching that, and this is where I like where he doesn't hold the audience's hands, that at some point this was probably a little discreet and it probably didn't start off openly in front of the whole orchestra. It's probably something that was a little clandestine at one point. And so we're already there with that. And then we have these allegations that are slowly, she's trying to even almost like hide from the audience, which I find kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And then we get a new cello player who comes in. And it's an interesting way for Todd Field to show us like almost 3 different stages of the way she treats the people in her professional life.
Yeah.
Because her partner was first in her professional life.
Yeah.
That's where they met. And then we have another person who's got allegations against, like, further down the road, who she didn't stay with. It's never overtly stated, like,
you don't
exactly
find out
what happened, because we
Yeah.
have the perspective of the quote unquote victim through social media, whom we never meet. And then we have Lydia Tarr's perspective.
Yep.
And there's nothing ever really fully confirmed about what happened, except you can watch in living time as the movie's going on what her relationship with this new young celloist is.
Yeah, which might inform you about how the other one was. But it's
Exactly.
not important what happened in that other relationship, because especially with social media, it's all going to be speculative anyway. And that's another aspect of this movie. Is like no one really knows the truth, but you're going to get vilified for whatever does come out.
Here's where I think I'll disagree with that very slightly, or at least expand on it in a way, is that, and what the point that I think he's getting at here is that people on the inside often know the truth. Everybody kind of knows what's going on with the new celloist. You can see the looks that they give each other. This looks familiar, or we kind of know what's happening here, but nobody says anything because everybody has a career and a future and themselves to think about. And that's exactly what the abuse of power is.
Feeds on.
But then and I think what the director in this movie is going for in this particular part of the story is about how change in these types of situations is almost always forced upon the person and the institution from the outside.
Yeah.
And that's where the social media stuff comes in. And that's where I think the way that the new celloist is presented as not being, she's not officially part of the orchestra. She comes into the world of classical music in a seemingly much different way than Lydia Tarr does, where they have a kind of meet and greet lunch.
Yeah.
And she sort of asks her, like, oh, like, what's your favorite piece? How did you come to learn about that? I learned about my favorite piece through these classes or whatever. And she's like, oh, I saw a YouTube video of this really cool woman playing this song on the cello, and I decided I wanted to do that. And she's like, how old are you? And she said 13. And you can tell that Lydia Tarr is like, that's completely different than what she, at least how she presents herself.
Yeah.
Because she's viewing that through the lens of like history, and she can't imagine Beethoven getting into classical music at the age of 13 by watching a video, or even just at the age of 13 in general. Obviously,
she's
videos
got
didn't
such
exist.
high regard for this like high art form, and like really it's accessible to anybody. It's just music. I'll think like when it boils down to it, it's just music. It's somebody gatekeeping their own like professional life because they're holding it in higher esteem, and it's just like, calm down.
And her kind of dictating what others have to do in order to ascend to her level or anywhere near
or
it.
Be considered, you know,
she
a part of that world.
The way things have to go to gear them towards the things that she is really good at and the things that she is knowledgeable in.
Mm-hmm.
So I think she's fascinated by her because she's an incredibly talented cellist. Yeah. And I find this really interesting. This is like maybe a very, very teeny spoiler, but there's a scene late in the movie where Cate Blanchett's character watches a VHS tape. And you can tell it's when things are kind of going poorly for her, and it's sort of meant to be like a remember who you used to be when it was all about the music. And I find that interesting because she's just watching this on a video, and the other girl just watched it on YouTube, and there's really not that big of a difference, but it goes back to the way she's presenting herself.
A lot of callbacks.
She's presenting herself as like already a part of history.
Yeah.
And I find that fascinating. And I think just the idea that it needs to come, like change needs to be forced from the outside because the people inside the institutions all have way too much at stake.
Yep.
In order to change anything. I find that a fascinating theme for this movie. And we've probably gone as long as we really need to without like doing a full on spoiler review. So unless you had anything else to say, I think we can dive into the stars.
Yeah. Let's get to the stars. We'll be right back.
We do that a lot. We click the buttons at the same time.
We have the same thought, like, oh,
yeah,
we should get rid of this.
I was like, oh, that's covering something.
And then boop, boop, and it pops right back.
Exactly. You know what? That was your job. I will keep out of it.
It's been a long week. Yeah. If you listen to our recommendations episode, that we also recorded that this week, and you know, we had some troubles, but we got through it.
Yeah, exactly.
some visual troubles, not some audio troubles, but
right.
As far as the star ratings are concerned, do you want to go first?
I will go.
Are you? Yeah,
I'll go first.
Okay. Sorry. All over.
That's fine. So I'm gonna give this 4 out of 5 stars. I think this is one of these, maybe the smartest movie I've seen this year. It's also a little cold and a little inaccessible to some people. Mm-hmm. This is an interesting movie because I think from a technical perspective and like an acting perspective, this is one of the best movies of the year.
Yeah.
But it's also one that I'm going to be very careful in who I recommend it to.
Yeah.
It's definitely not for everybody. So really, I mean, keeping it below the 4.5, 5 range is just, it is a little cold. I never had one moment that made me go, holy shit, this is amazing, but rather just like great all the way through.
Yeah.
I will say one thing I do want to mention though, one scene from an acting perspective that I think takes it up to like the top level here, which we didn't even mention. So I need to mention this scene when she's teaching a class at Juilliard and she just destroys
the second scene is bananas, and that's where like some of the philosophy of this movie comes into play. That's where she breaches with like, well, if you don't like Bach because of X, Y, and Z, like that's probably one of the most talented people in history, like of anything. And if you can't like him because of one bad thing, like we're all fucked. You know what I
Right,
mean?
but I find that fascinating too, because
Yeah.
she does this thing where she's kind of like pre-defending herself.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, is she aware that she's been doing shitty things? Or does she not think they're shitty because she's so good at what she does that it doesn't matter?
Yeah.
And
How
it's a
does she feel
fascinating
about
thing, but
herself?
that scene is also all one take. And it's a kid
Yeah.
who identifies as a BIPOC pangender or something.
I don't remember what he said. All I heard was BIPOC, which is
but basically he doesn't like Bach because of his sort of like racist white history, and he has chosen a piece for this class to do that is by a minority conductor, and he's more interested in exploring that angle. And Lydia Tarr just eviscerates this kid, and she goes beyond just educating him to like actively attempting to humiliate him in front of his peers.
Yeah.
And that is, so just from an acting perspective, I think like that was peak of the movie for me. But there was never one of those scenes where I felt like fully mesmerized by what was in front of me, probably because the movie is so cold. And then there's one decision in the final 20 minutes that I didn't love, and it felt a little out of character for Lydia Tarr. But I do think the ending is hilarious, and I can definitely see people maybe not getting it.
Oh, it's a hard turn.
But it almost becomes a different movie in the last 20 minutes.
I was just going to say, like, it's
which
definitely
I also think,
not, it's not the same as the entire other runtime.
Yeah, that was my only, like, I like the end and it fits the story, but it also started to feel like they were kind of making a different movie in the last 20 minutes than they were in the first. So those are just small quibbles, kind of the ending feeling a little different. And then, just having it be like a little cold, but it's wonderfully done. And we can talk about this movie for hours too. Lots of conversation around it. And Cate Blanchett is one of my favorite actresses of all time, and this is possibly her best performance.
Yeah, I'm going to echo a lot of the things you said here. I'm giving this 4 stars as well. First, I'll start with if you liked her in Don't Look Up, because she's fantastic in Don't Look Up. It's kind of like a different side of the same coin. Like, you can tell in that movie that she's like out acting everybody else on screen, including Leonardo DiCaprio.
You mean even when he screams at the camera?
Right. She's just on a whole nother level in that movie. And then you get this and you're like, oh yeah, there it is. You're like, of course she's nailing this. She's that good. But this whole movie, the quality level, I never had that same moment of this is breathtaking, this is amazing. It just starts very, very good and just continues that. It's just
That's
like
probably a good point too, is it's kind of there from the beginning.
It rides the 4 the entire way. Like it might waver a little bit, but it never really like drops down to like a 3.5 or goes up to a 4.5. It's just, it rides that 4 level the entire way through. I hated her when I started. Like, I didn't know what I was getting into, and that whole first scene where she's giving like the accolades and she's having that interview, I was just like, am I supposed to like her? She sucks. Like,
I don't think so. You're supposed to respect her talent,
but still not like her, which is like perfectly in line with all of the rest of the themes of the movie.
Right. And at what point do we decide that?
Are you rooting for her? Yeah.
Right.
Are you know, like it's beautifully done in that regard. Those opening 2 scenes are fantastic. Just straight up acting wise. I will say I have a little bit closer relation to classical music, not by a lot, but than maybe some people. My mother was a piano teacher when I was growing up, so I grew up listening to like Bach, Beethoven, Stravinsky, like Chopin, like all of those. That was like all I heard growing up. I couldn't pick out individual pieces. I couldn't tell you who did what or anything like that. But if I hear it, I go, oh, like I know who that is, or like I recognize this. So it was a very interesting movie to like get another side of, or like learn a little bit more about, or just be in that world. And I want to say I'm going to recommend this to my mom, because she'll like the musical aspects of this movie. I don't know about the rest of it, the cancel culture stuff, that maybe that will help explain some stuff to her, or just like, you know, more familiarity with that type of topic. But I just thought it was very well done. I can see where it's cold because her character is so unloving at certain points.
Yeah.
And so into herself and her own thing. But there's shades of everybody in Lydia Tarr, just at which level. So the philosophical question it calls into, that makes you think about, is just wonderful. And I really think this is one of the better movies of the year. I'd love to see it again. I don't know if it's going to jump up to a 4.5 at that point. But overall quality is stunning in this movie, and Cate Blanchett's fantastic. A big shout out to Noemie Merlant, because of course,
also Nina Haas is in this movie, and she is fantastic. So
she's fantastic. There's a cameo from Mark Strong, which I think was underutilized, but that was fun.
His character was a little weird to me. He was the one who felt like he maybe didn't quite fit with just kind of everything else.
Yeah, I wish they had something else had worked more with him.
Yeah,
but I liked what happened with him later on, but I didn't necessarily like enjoy that character. I don't know. I like Mark Strong though, so it's always easy to be like, all right, well, let's see what you got. So I don't know. Very strong movie. 4 stars, solid 4 stars. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, awesome. So I think should be it. And is it your turn to put a wrap on the show?
Yeah, I've got it. The only thing that worried me was the actual killing. How does one do that? How does one kill a man? It's one thing to dream about it. Very different when you have to do it with your own hands.